Hey friend, don't forget to subscribe. One click for you means the world for me. I had just finished carving into the turkey at the head of my own dining table, uniform sleeves rolled up from 6 straight hours of work in the kitchen, when my mother-in-law decided to seize the spotlight. Typical Margaret. She raised her glass like she was officiating a toast. Everyone, this is Daniel. He's a colleague of Claire's. I didn't bother glancing up immediately, just pressed the blade through the crisp skin, steady as I'd once been on patrol. When I finally looked, there he was, early 30s, tall, clean-cut navy blazer, flashing that self-satisfied grin like he'd just won a medal. Margaret leaned in closer. Daniel's a man with real drive. He's moving up fast, unlike those who spend their time tinkering on old projects. My hands didn't twitch. I handed him the dish of stuffing, caught sight of his jacket. Same brand Margaret had gifted me years ago, back when she thought I'd climb a different ladder. Stuffing? I asked, steady grip. He hesitated a beat before taking it. Sure. Thanks. Claire, my wife, kept her head down, slicing ham with surgical precision, refusing to meet my eyes. Daniel, I said evenly, what brings you into a married woman's home for Christmas dinner? His spoon froze in midair. Claire's sister Hannah choked back a cough into her napkin. Margaret laughed too lightly, waving her hand like I'd made a harmless joke. Daniel stammered, Claire invited me. We work together. She said it'd be fine. Plenty of things get called fine that aren't, I replied. Quick note before we keep going. Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing where you're all watching from. I poured more wine, never looked at Claire, just let the silence anchor the room. Then calmly I said, I've been recording conversations in this house for half a year now. Just in case tonight went the way I suspected. Knives clinked against plates. Hannah sputtered on her drink. Daniel's knuckles whitened around his fork. Margaret laughed again, brittle, forced. Oh, Captain Morgan, don't be absurd. I fixed my stare on her. Am I? Daniel's eyes darted toward Claire, realizing maybe he'd walked into the wrong battlefield. Claire finally looked up, not at me but at the ceiling as though escape lay above her. Relax, I added, dropping the carving knife onto the cutting board with a dull thud. Not live-streamed or anything. The silence stretched. Hannah whispered something low to Claire. I walked to the sideboard, poured bourbon neat, leaned back against the counter. Funny thing, I said, swirling the glass. I almost didn't host this year. Figured others might already have plans. Margaret smiled too wide. That would have been tragic. I swallowed half the drink in one go. Depends who you ask. I turned toward Daniel. You like it here? Feels warm, doesn't it? He nodded, late, hesitant, eyes still flicking toward Claire like he was waiting for a rescue call that never came. Too late. I tossed my napkin onto the plate, wiped my hands and stood tall. Well, settle in. You already seem plenty comfortable. I walked out of the dining room, left the knife gleaming beside the half-carved turkey. Let them stew in it. The game had started and I wasn't the one sweating. I stood by the bar cart, swirling the bourbon slow, when Margaret strolled back in, all fake warmth, pitching her voice like she was unveiling some bright new recruit. You know, she said, pointing toward Daniel like he was a keynote speaker. He's on track to make partner in under 5 years. His firm's expanding. Big vision. Big future. Daniel straightened, pretending to stay modest but savoring every word. Claire said nothing, folding her napkin into neat little squares. Hannah snorted softly into her wine. Margaret kept pushing. He's got the timing, the discipline. For kids at least. Some people still believe in legacy. I walked back slowly, sat down with deliberate calm and forked a bite off my plate. Chewed. Swallowed. Let the pause draw out. For kids, I said at last. That's ambitious. Better make sure the prenup is airtight. Children bleed money. The table went stone still. Hannah froze mid-sip. Daniel's lip twitched like he wasn't sure if he should laugh. He didn't. I leaned in slightly. Funny thing, I added, tone steady. When Claire and I married, she insisted we keep every cent separate. Said she'd never be one of those women who ended up trapped. Her words. I shoved my plate aside. So we signed an ironclad prenup. My home, my shop, my contracts, stay mine. Margaret's jaw tightened but her tone stayed sugary. That was years ago. People change. Maybe, I said, but contracts don't. Not unless both sides sign again. I turned to Daniel. Do you like the house? Custom oak beams, reclaimed cedar floors. Every wire, every outlet, done with my own hands over 3 years. He nodded weakly. Technically, I continued, it's a rental. I own it. Claire pays rent. Below market, of course. I wouldn't want to hurt her pride. Hannah let out a sharp laugh like I'd just cracked the darkest joke at the table. You charge your wife rent? Not my idea, I smiled. That was hers. Said it kept her feeling independent. Got the emails if you'd like proof. Claire finally spoke, voice low. That was years ago. 3, I said flatly. Still counts. Daniel cleared his throat, shifting in his chair like it suddenly didn't fit. I didn't realize you two were still under the same roof. I glanced at Claire, who studied her water glass like it had answers. Because someone told you a different story, didn't they? I asked. Daniel didn't reply. He didn't have to. Hannah tried to step in. Well, maybe things just got cozy. Too cozy. I set my glass down with a deliberate thud. Comforts earned, Hannah. Not handed out like rations on Christmas morning. Margaret's face tightened. Morgan, this isn't the time. I turned toward Margaret. So when exactly would be the right time? After Daniel lays down a deposit on a nursery that will never belong to him. She opened her mouth, then shut it just as quick. First moment all night she didn't have a comeback. I leaned back, arms crossed. Strange, isn't it? Everyone keeps talking about ambition and legacy like I'm just background noise. Like I didn't build half the foundation this family leans on. Daniel shifted like he wanted to speak but thought better of it. Good call. Claire suddenly rose from her chair. I need to check the rolls. Let me guess, I said flatly. Yoga rolls. She didn't respond, just left. I looked back at Daniel. You're new here, so I'll clue you in. Margaret doesn't introduce men to her daughters. She auditions them like she's casting a military recruitment poster. She doesn't care who you are. She cares how you'll look in the family album. I flicked my eyes to Hannah. She even tried pairing you with a heart surgeon last year, didn't she? Hannah rolled her eyes but didn't deny it. Daniel's hand still clutched his fork, but his plate sat untouched. You want to know what real commitment looks like? I asked. Ask what happens when the uniforms are off, the room is quiet, and there's no audience to impress. If you can't handle that reality, then this isn't your battlefield. I tapped the table once. Daniel finally looked me dead in the eye. I didn't come here to replace me? I cut him off. No, he said quickly. It's not that. Then what is it? I pressed. You walk into another soldier's home dressed like you're on a recruitment poster, sit at my table, soak up praise from my wife's mother, and act shocked when someone questions your intentions. He opened his mouth, closed it again, still strangling that fork. Margaret jumped in, desperate now. Daniel's a good man, steady, dependable. Then he won't mind answering one question, I shot back, turning to him. Planning on moving in? Raising those 4 children in a house wired by someone else's hands? Cooking in a kitchen you didn't pay for? Sleeping in a room Claire decorates with discounted rent? Hannah gasped. Margaret whispered, by God. Daniel looked down at the table. I don't know what Claire told you. She didn't tell me a thing, I cut in. I've just been watching. I lifted my glass again, not to drink, just to let the weight of it hang there. The real fight was only starting. Margaret tried to brush it off, her voice strained but still sugary. Well, Daniel's investing in commercial property, real clients, serious growth. Not small-time rentals. I didn't even glance at her. I reached into my jacket, pulled out my phone, and scrolled until I found the right folder. Actually, Margaret, I said evenly, you know that sleek office building in Arlington you're always bragging about? The one Claire works out of. I rotated the screen toward Daniel. Contracts, signatures, transfers. I bought it 2 years ago. Quietly. Under my own company. Daniel's face went pale. Wait, you're her landlord? Technically, I said. But what interests me more is the 27% equity stake I hold in the firm itself. Structured through blind trusts, layered investors. Nothing visible until the dividends hit. Margaret's jaw twitched. That's not possible. I finally looked up. That's how private equity works. You don't notice it until the checks clear. Hannah froze, her hand locked on her wineglass. So, Claire's firm answers to you. I laughed once, sharp. Not directly. She just owns less than she thinks. But she's welcome to keep Daniel on her junior team, as long as rent keeps clearing. Daniel blinked hard, doing the math, realizing he'd stepped into a company where the woman he was circling around unknowingly worked under her own spouse's control. Margaret's composure cracked. Her voice flattened. No, she would have told us. I turned the phone so she could see leases, notarized signatures, transfers, every file labeled and time-stamped. She didn't know. Broker handled it through a Delaware holding company. Clean, professional. No emotions involved. Just an undervalued asset, underpaid staff, and low overhead. That building has doubled in value since I bought it, and Claire's team stabilized it beautifully. Daniel finally spoke, voice shaky. But why? Why keep it secret? I leaned back, calm. Because I never mixed marriage with business. Even when she did. Margaret snapped. This isn't about business, you're twisting it. No, Margaret, I said, sliding the phone back into my pocket. You just assumed my silence meant I didn't know. The truth is, I've been backing Claire's firm from a distance for 2 years. Not out of sentiment, because it made sense. Solid partners, scalable vision, and Claire? She works hard. I'll give her that. Hannah's voice trembled. Does Claire even know you own it? I locked eyes with her. She'll know soon enough. The realization settled heavy across the room. The temperature itself felt colder. Even the hum of the ceiling vent buzzed louder. Daniel gripped his water glass like a lifeline, hand shaking. This is a lot. I nodded once. It's not complicated. I saw an opportunity. I took it. And now I hold the leverage. That's all this is, I said flatly. Then I noticed Claire had slipped back into the room, trying to look like she hadn't missed a thing. She froze when she saw their faces, posture stiff in the doorway. You holding up? I asked. She nodded slowly. Yeah. Just needed some air. I gestured toward the table. We were just covering business. Yours specifically. Her eyes darted from Margaret to Daniel, then back to me. What did you say? Nothing you wouldn't find in your quarterly reports, I replied. Though I'd advise you review that lease before renewal. Markets shifted. Hannah coughed into her napkin, uncomfortable. Daniel stayed rigid, shoulders squared like he'd been ordered to stand at attention. Margaret sat motionless, her jaw tight, eyes frozen forward. So what now? She finally asked, voice hard. You think this makes you some kind of savior? No, I said. It makes me the only one here who hasn't lied about where I stand. I didn't trick anyone. I signed deals, put up capital, and got returns. Claire lowered herself into her seat, her face pale. You really own the building? Yes. Since 2023. It's under Ironwood Holdings. The inspector who walked through during your lease renewal? He worked for me. Her shoulders sagged, not angry, not surprised. Just the look of someone realizing the ground had been shifting beneath her boots all along. The silence after that was heavy. No one spoke. Not even Margaret. I speared another bite of turkey, slow and deliberate. You all like talking about growth, legacy, building something meaningful. Thought you should know I've been doing that this entire time. Just without the speeches. Daniel rubbed his forehead, looking rattled. So, you're not just a woman who builds furniture? I smiled. Oh, I build plenty. But I learned long ago, real power comes from owning the land under the structure. I chewed. Watched Margaret finally break eye contact. Watched Hannah swallow hard. Daniel didn't even touch his plate. Claire stayed silent, she didn't need to say a word. The numbers had already spoken. I leaned back in my chair, eyes steady on Daniel. Did Margaret tell you we're divorced? He froze as if I'd drawn a sidearm right across the table. His gaze snapped to Margaret, then Claire, then back to me. She said the separation was final, that it wasn't public yet, and that you were abusive, controlling, and infertile. I let out a dry, sharp laugh. Infertile? That's a creative one. Claire stared at the placemat like maybe fabric could save her from reality. Margaret gripped her wine glass so hard I thought it might shatter. I didn't need a confession. Daniel had already given it to me. Wrong again, I said. I've got the full medical file. Fertility, labs, panels. Everything checks out. We just chose not to have kids. I paused, then fixed my eyes on Margaret. Because raising a child with you in the equation would have been reckless endangerment. Hannah sucked in a sharp breath, nearly speaking, then thought better of it. Daniel blinked, rattled, looking like he'd swallowed spoiled rations. Margaret snapped, "You really think that little of me?" "No," I said calmly. "I think that accurately of you." Daniel shook his head, grimacing. He didn't know." "Save it," I cut in. "Let's not pretend you came here for a holiday meal. You're not that naive." He hesitated too long, then opened his mouth like he might try a lie, but nothing came out. "What did she promise you?" I asked. "Equity in the firm? A handshake deal to squeeze into the family business." Margaret started to interject, but I raised my hand slowly, like an officer calling for silence. She shut her mouth. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Finally he admitted, quiet, "I wasn't here for Claire. Margaret said there might be business opportunities with the family." "Bingo," I said, leaning forward, elbows on the table. "You came for the deal, not the woman." He shook his head quickly. "It's not like that." "It's exactly like that," I replied. "You walked in thinking you were sealing something. Margaret dangled her daughter like bait, and you snapped at it without checking the line." He ran a hand over his face. "Yeah. I messed up." "No," I said firmly. "You made a calculated decision. You saw a soldier's wife, assumed her partner was out of the fight, and figured you could slide in and claim ground. You're not even the first she's tried it with. You're just the fool who showed up to dinner." Daniel had no reply. He stared at the salt shaker like it might rescue him. Margaret tried to recover, lifting her chin. "Daniel is a respected professional. He has every right to be here." "Not at my table, he doesn't," I snapped. "You lied to him, Margaret. Spun fantasies about my health, my marriage, my wife. And he bought it because it suited him. Because he wanted the shortcut." Daniel finally found his voice. "I wasn't trying to take anything from anyone." "You already did," I said. "You took time. You took trust. You took up space that wasn't yours." Claire spoke softly, almost whispering. "This has gotten out of hand." I locked eyes on her. "Did it? Or did it play out exactly the way you planned?" Until someone finally said the quiet part out loud. She looked away, lips pressed tight. Daniel let out a long exhale. "I didn't mean to cause problems." "You came here to position yourself," I said. "That's the same thing." Hannah muttered under her breath, "Jesus." I turned back to Margaret. "So what was the end game? Install Daniel, edge me out, then parade around with your perfect family empire for the country club." Her face betrayed her before her lips did. That twitch in her jaw. That flinch in her eye. She'd thought I'd walk quietly. "You built a story about a broken marriage just to bring in a younger man with ambition," I said. "Fed him lies until he thought the door was wide open. And you probably told yourself it was all for Claire's benefit." Margaret shot to her feet, voice cracking. "I was protecting my daughter." "No," I said, steady as a drill sergeant. "You were controlling her. Like you always do. Except this time, you played your hand in front of the wrong officer." Daniel turned to her, face pale. "You lied to me about everything." She flinched but said nothing. "You wanted in," she muttered weakly. "I gave you the opening." Daniel slumped back. "At what cost?" I raised my glass toward him. "Congratulations. Welcome to the family." Then I drank. No shouting, no theatrics. I simply reached into my back pocket, pulled a folded paper and laid it on the table like it was a field report. "Let's discuss Tuesdays." Claire's head jerked toward me too fast. Hannah shifted uneasily. Margaret slammed her wine down a little too hard. "You haven't touched me in 6 months, I said calmly. "Not even a brush in passing." "Fine, distance happens. But 3 months ago you opened a separate checking account. I've got the records." Claire stared at me, frozen, like she was waiting for an incoming missile. "Your browser history shows a full night booking boutique hotels in Trenton. And funny enough, not a single charge on the firm's card. But your mother's? Swipe, swipe, swipe." I smiled coldly. "Like clockwork." Hannah covered her mouth. No one dared make small talk anymore. "Every Tuesday. Same hotel. Room 214. You're consistent, Claire. I'll give you that." She opened her mouth, then shut it. Her grip on her fork went white-knuckled. "Client meetings?" I asked. "What?" she whispered. "The hotel bookings. Every Tuesday. 3 to 7. That's business, she tried. Interesting, I said. Because your assistant says Tuesdays are your yoga days. Except you haven't been to a session in months. She said you outgrew the practice. Margaret shot up. This is inappropriate. I didn't even glance her way. So is trying to swap out your son-in-law for a junior associate at Christmas dinner. Sit down. That shut her up. Daniel scraped his chair back, already rising. He didn't say a word, just looked at the door like it was his only salvation. I didn't sign up for this, he muttered. I lifted my glass in Daniel's direction. No hard feelings. But if you stick around this mess, your name goes down with it. If I were you, I'd walk now. He gave one quick nod. Understood. And just like that he left. No farewell, no excuses. Didn't even look back at Claire. The door clicked behind him, louder than it should have. I turned to Claire. Room 214 must be one hell of a training ground. Her eyes finally locked with mine, hard, stiff but heavy with something. Guilt. Fear. Maybe shame. Who knew anymore? You went through my laptop, she accused. You left it open, I replied. On the kitchen table. You were in the shower. I moved the charger, saw your browser open to the booking page. At first I thought maybe it was a surprise getaway for us. Turns out the only one getting pampered was you. Hannah gasped quietly. Margaret looked ready to hurl her glass at my head. I wouldn't have blinked. You think I don't recognize patterns? I asked. Different perfume. The long drives that suddenly cleared your head. 30 minutes turning into 3 hours. Claire's voice was small, broken. It wasn't like that. Then what was it? I leaned forward. Weekly massages you just couldn't reschedule? A support group for wives who cheat and lie under oath. Morgan, she started, but I cut her off. Do you have any idea what it's like to sit in your own home every Tuesday, wondering if your spouse is walking back in with freshly washed hair and a neck stiff from someone else's bed? Do you know what that does to a soldier who built that roof, wired those lights, sealed those floorboards with her own hands? Her eyes glistened, but I felt nothing. That part of me, the part that softened for her, had been burned out. She traded it for room 214. For someone she didn't even bother to hide. I turned to Margaret, who still sat upright, ready to defend. This is where you swoop in, right? Say it's complicated. Tell me. I pulled away. That men don't understand emotional needs. Her arms crossed. She was unhappy. And instead of counseling, she picked hotel beds and secret accounts, I said. That's not growth, that's cowardice. But sure, blame the one who didn't chase her with flowers and therapy sessions. Hannah spoke up softly. You don't need to do this in front of us. Yes, I do, I answered. They've sat through the rest of the briefing. They deserve to hear the finale. Claire pushed her chair back. I need air. No, I said. You need truth. And you've dodged it since March. Her voice cracked. This isn't fair. Fair, I nodded, would have been you saying you weren't in love anymore. Fair would have been a conversation, not a hotel reservation. She left without another word. The silence after was thick, broken only by Margaret breathing like she'd just run a sprint. I warned her, Margaret muttered. No, I said, rising to my feet and dropping printed records on the table like playing cards. You coached her. I didn't wait for her reaction. I strode to the cabinet, poured myself another drink. Neat. No ice. No tremor in my hand. When lies are digital, all it takes is a printer to make them real. I set the glass down. No more paper. Time for Exhibit A. I opened a heavy oak drawer, the one Margaret always said clashed with the decor, the one I'd built myself, and pulled out a small black USB drive. White label, bold letters. Margaret logs. The room froze. Even Hannah stopped mid-breath. Claire, halfway to the hallway, stiffened. Daniel, just shy of the door, turned back slightly. Knew this day might come, I said, walking to the television. I bent down, plugged it in. The screen came alive. Folders labeled audio. November. December. I hit play. No video, just crisp audio cleaned up by my cousin Alex. Same cousin Margaret dismissed as just a coder. The same cousin who'd built the monitoring system tied to the family iPad. And there was, her voice. Confident. Calculated. We'll push Morgan out quietly. Claire deserves someone with ambition. Daniel's young, sharp, easier to manage. I can even shuffle firm funds to smooth the transition. Hannah shot up like the couch had shocked her, trying to block the screen with her body. This is vile. Turn it off. I was already cueing the next file. Thanksgiving dining room mic. Margaret's voice again. Harsher this time. The real version. Morgan's the dead weight. She drags Claire down. She'll never scale. The room shifted instantly. No more polite gasps. No more "we didn't know." The truth was broadcast raw and loud enough to rattle the picture frames. Daniel stepped back like the sound itself was poison. His mouth opened, no words came. Claire dropped her head into her hands, shoulders tight as if bracing for artillery. Hannah staggered back, staring at her mother like she was seeing her for the first time. Margaret's mask shattered. Mouth open, eyes wide, posture screaming panic. "Plotting to replace me in my own home," I said evenly, stepping toward the screen. "Guess you thought no one was listening." She lunged for the TV, hands wild, desperate to pull the plug. But she didn't make it. "Sit down, Margaret." The voice boomed like a gavel. Tom's. The way he said it froze her in mid-stride. Everyone turned. He wasn't shouting, just steady. The kind of tone you hear from a man who's been silent too long and finally decided enough was enough. Margaret's lips trembled. "Tom." He reached out, caught her wrist before she could touch the cord. Not rough. Not violent. Just firm. Like he was holding the last thread of discipline left in the room. "You're destroying this family," she shrieked. Tom didn't flinch. Not a blink, not a twitch. I stepped forward, pulled the USB from the port with slow precision and slipped it into my pocket. "No," I said evenly. "I just let everyone hear the family you already engineered." The screen went black. No music, no outro, just her own voice still clinging to the air like rot under wallpaper. Nobody moved. Even Hannah sank back into her chair like the weight in the room had doubled. Claire never lifted her head. Not once. Tom released Margaret's wrist slowly, deliberately. She didn't say a word, not because she was apologetic. Margaret didn't do apologies. She stayed silent because she knew there was no spinning what had been recorded. You can dress up motives. You can excuse emotions. But you can't erase your own voice. Daniel looked at me across the room, still silent, mouth half open. "You're free to leave," I told him. "You already saw what you came for." He didn't argue. Just nodded once and slipped toward the hallway, quiet as a ghost. No one followed. The sound of the door clicking shut behind him echoed longer than it should have. The room no longer felt like a living space. It was a stage after curtain call, actors frozen mid-scene, props out of place, script gutted. Margaret eased herself down onto the armrest of the couch like her legs couldn't carry her anymore. "You did this," Hannah whispered sharply toward her mother. Claire still hadn't spoken. Tom moved to the edge of the room, hands clasped behind his back, surveying the wreckage. Not just Margaret in front of him, but years of dinners, manipulations, and moments he'd swallowed without speaking. I sat down again. No more documents, no more evidence. Just the aftermath. I looked at Claire, the woman I once trusted, then at the woman who raised her. "You wanted a legacy," I said quietly. "Well, this is it." Silence. Because what answer do you give when your blueprint has just been read aloud? The stillness wasn't just heavy, it was final. And then Tom spoke. "Enough." He didn't shout. He didn't even move. But the steel in his voice cut clean through the air. Every head turned. Margaret recoiled like she'd been struck. Hannah fell back into her chair as if her spine gave out. Even Claire looked up, eyes wide, like she'd forgotten her father was capable of raising his voice at all. Tom stood straight, shoulders squared, unreadable. When he spoke again, his tone was sharp, deliberate, like a judge reading a verdict. "You lied to me, Margaret. Told me tonight was about peace, about family. That we needed to come together, put things right." He took one step forward. "Instead, you staged an ambush." Margaret opened her mouth, but nothing came out. He turned to Daniel, eyes cold but not cruel. "Young man, my wife used you. That was wrong. If you've got any sense, you'll leave this behind with your head high, and don't look back." Daniel lowered his gaze, nodding, gripping his coat like a cadet caught cheating on inspection. Then Tom turned toward Claire, his whole presence shifting. He didn't soften. He narrowed his eyes like he was stripping away every excuse she'd ever leaned on. "And you don't think hiding behind your mother saves you. You let her run your marriage like it was a business contract. You let her speak for you, decide for you, lie for you. That's on you. Claire opened her mouth but no words came. Just silence, broken lips moving once, twice, then shutting. Finally Margaret found her voice, sharp and loud. I was protecting us, protecting this family. Tom didn't blink. From the portfolio he'd carried under his arm, he pulled out a thick folder and dropped it on the table. The thud made everyone flinch. You call this protection? He asked. His tone was surgical. He flipped it open with calm precision. Inside, pages of financial statements, color-coded tabs. He slid one free, a bank ledger holding it up. A Cayman account under your maiden name. Transfers just under disclosure thresholds. 42,000 at a time. 6 years running. Balance as of last quarter, 1.8 million. Margaret's eyes glazed. Her throat worked but no words came out. Tom kept going. Shell accounts. 6 different names. All routed through a Miami law office. Conveniently the same firm your cousin works at. Hannah made a small sound, a gasp, maybe a sob. Tom didn't look at her. He just kept reading. You drained money we earned together. Money I worked for, money I saved. And you stood here for years, lecturing us on loyalty, family, sacrifice. Margaret's voice cracked. You spied on me. Tom shook his head once. No. I paid attention. Something I should have done years ago. He slid the folder to the center of the table like evidence at trial. His hand steady. His tone unwavering. I had the records audited last month, quietly. Needed to be certain before I said a word. Margaret looked like she'd swallowed glass. Her lips moved but nothing followed. Tom stood taller than I'd seen him in years. No fear. No hesitation. Like a man who realized he wasn't the one on trial anymore. Maybe it's time I call a lawyer, he said calmly. That sentence hit harder than any audio, harder than any exposure. It was the foundation giving way. The one ally Margaret always assumed she had, finally cutting loose. Margaret collapsed into her chair like someone had cut the power from her body. Her eyes darted wildly, searching for a defender, but none came. Claire stayed frozen. Hannah turned away. Even the ceiling lights felt like interrogation lamps. Tom shifted his gaze toward me, giving a single nod. Not approval, acknowledgement. As if to say, you're not standing alone anymore. I didn't speak. Just watched the empire Margaret built on whispers and control fracture down the center. No shouting. No chaos. Just paper and proof. Each document a round fired clean. She could argue emotions forever, but signatures and ledgers? That was law. I stood, no need for theatrics, and slipped into my coat as if I were packing the final bag after deployment. Tom, I said, facing him. Thank you. You've always been solid. Sorry it came to this. He gave me a firm nod. You deserved better. The words hit harder than I expected. Not because I needed comfort, but because it was the first true sentence anyone besides me had spoken all night. I turned for the hall. Claire stood quickly as if she'd been waiting for her cue. Her voice came soft, pleading. Can we talk, just the two of us? I didn't look back. You had months, I said. Not sharp, not cruel, just final. I gave you rope. You built the noose. She didn't answer. There was nothing left to add. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text. From Daniel. Thanks for the warning. I'm out. This family's radioactive. I smirked. At least he finally learned how to read a room. Took public humiliation and a few recordings, but still. Tom came up behind me, steady as always, and opened the door. That cabin in Dutchess County, he said quietly. The one Margaret brags about like she entertains senators there. Yeah, I said, narrowing my eyes. What about it? I own it, he said. Bought it before we married. Title's still in my name. She's just been squatting in the story. He pulled a brass key from his wallet, handed it to me. If you need a breather, it's under the flower pot. I turned the key over in my hand before sliding it into my pocket. Appreciate it. I'll be fine. His face stayed still, but I saw it. Something in his eyes relaxing for the first time. You sure? Yeah, I said. I've been planning this exit for a while. Just waited for the right curtain to fall. Tom leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, more at ease than I'd seen him in years. You know that bench in my study? He asked. The walnut one Margaret always swears came from some fancy Vermont designer. I nodded. Yeah. I know it. I bought it from you. Back in 2019. Ordered through your cousin's site, told Margaret I found it in Burlington. Paid cash. I stopped a beat. You serious? He shrugged. Like the work. Didn't need her approval. I grinned. Solid taste, Tom. He didn't smile back, but his voice shifted just slightly. You build things to last even when the people around them don't. Cold air slapped my face as I stepped onto the porch. I glanced back once. Claire still frozen in the hall, Margaret slumped like a puppet with cut strings, Hannah looking ready to bolt. Tell your cousin I'll be in touch, Tom added. Time I stop pretending all my furniture's imported. I gave him a nod. I'll let him know. Then I walked down the steps into the dark, my truck waiting loyal and quiet. The house didn't crumble behind me. Didn't need to. It was already broken from within. By the time I pulled into my own driveway, the cab was silent, engine ticking, headlights sweeping the snow like stage lights on the last act. Inside, my home was just as I left it. Warm, orderly, mine. My phone buzzed nonstop. Claire, Margaret, Hannah, unknown numbers. All blocked. I hit do not disturb. This wasn't the hour for backpedaling or hollow apologies. You don't set a soldier on fire and then ask if she felt the heat. I opened my laptop and clicked through the archive I'd been building for 6 months. Index. Dated. Contracts, recordings, bank transfers, all layered like exhibits. Then I called Halpern. He picked up on the second ring. Captain Morgan. Been wondering when you'd pull the trigger. It's time, I said. Full motion. Full motion. Make it tight. Got it. Send the files. I dropped a secure folder into his inbox before we hung up. Minutes later he texted back. This is airtight. Cleanest case I've seen in years. Damn right, I muttered, pouring a whiskey neat. I sat at the counter watching the upload bar finish its last megabytes. My phone buzzed again. Tom, you did what I should have done 10 years ago. I typed back, still time. Left it at that. Whether he'd act now wasn't my burden. Another buzz. My cousin Alex, the quiet tech guy. He was the one who set up the iPad sync, the hidden dashboard. His text, got every word. Even back to April. Transcripts done. I shot back fast. Thanks. Send to Halpern. Backup off-site. He sent a thumbs up. And just like that, I had more documentation than some courts process in a year. This wasn't vengeance. I wasn't chasing flames. This was cleanup. Securing what others tried to bury. New Year's Eve. No fireworks. No countdown. Just the steady hum of my shop heater and the smell of sawdust. I brushed the final coat onto a walnut desk destined for a client in Tribeca. Brass inlays, smooth drawers. Strong. Precise. Unlike the people I'd dined with last week. On the bench beside it sat a USB labeled in block letters. Legacy erased. It held everything. Every email. Every deed. Every file. Burned into OneDrive in case someone ever tried to rewrite history. Next to it, a sketchbook of new designs. The start of my Freedom series. Not just furniture. Statements. Built from steel, cherry, and walnut. Built for people who've walked through hell and come out unbroken. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Don't worry. I pulled my bid from the firm. No interest in their mess. You deserve clean air. At least the man knew when to retreat. Then another ping. Tom again. Happy New Year. You're better off. I didn't respond. He knew I got it. No words needed. Outside, the snow started falling, soft and steady, blanketing the world like a reset. I stepped out, apron still dusted with sawdust, boots crunching on frozen ground. No cheers, no music, just breath in my lungs and no one pulling my strings anymore. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't need to. I looked forward into the snow, the silence, the year ahead. And I smiled. Would you rebuild from scratch? Or leave it all behind? Share your answer in the comments. And if this story struck you, subscribe, drop a like, and let me know your thoughts. To see what's next, click the box on the left. YouTube picked it for you. Let's find out if they guessed right.